So to everyone just joining, welcome to the GSSA Applying to Neurosurgery Residency webinar. We're just going to give a couple minutes to let the attendees join, and then we'll get started in a minute or two. Okay, so it looks like the numbers are leveling off a little bit, so why don't we get started? So welcome everyone to the GSSA Applying to Residency in Neurosurgery webinar. We're really excited to have 4 awesome residents with us today. Dr. Weiss might be coming in a little bit late. She's on call, so try to make it if she can. But what we're going to start with is introducing the residents, and then they'll each say a little bit about themselves. So I'm going to start with Dr. Ammar. Dr. Ammar received his medical degree from the University of Illinois at Chicago and is currently a 6-year neurosurgery resident at Montefiore Medical Center, the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx. He is a Global Neurosurgery Fellow in the program in Global Surgery and Social Change at Harvard Medical School and is a Secretariat member of the Global Neurosurgery Committee of the WFNS and a volunteer with the Virtual Foundation working with neurosurgeons in Mongolia to improve neurosurgery capacity. So we're really excited to have Dr. Ammar here, and so if you don't mind just saying a little bit about your work.
Thanks, Sarah. So as she said, I'm Adam. I'm a 6-year neurosurgery resident. Currently on my research year. So for us, it's during our 6th year. Originally from Chicago, bounced around a little bit, ended up in the East Coast. I really didn't get into global neurosurgery until very recently. And so I was lucky enough to be able to get connected with the program in global surgery and social change at Harvard that focuses on surgery in general, but Key Park, who's one of the big policy and advocacy experts in the field, brought me on board with him. And the work that we're doing is attached to the Global Neurosurgery Committee of the WFNS. So it's really a broad overlook of everything in global neurosurgery, from education, training, workforce, to economics, research, capacity building, and policy and advocacy alignment. And so there's a lot of work that gets done. In terms of research, it's mostly focused on looking at what's the training and surgeon capacities around the world, specifically in LMICs that we're doing our work on.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Ammar. So maybe next we'll go to Dr. Rebecca Reynolds. So Dr. Reynolds was born in San Diego, California, and grew up there as in eastern Nebraska. She attended the University of California, San Diego as a Regent Scholar. There she graduated in 2011 with a Bachelor of Science degree in Bioengineering, earning summa cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa honors. Her medical degree was awarded from Vanderbilt University School of Medicine in 2015. And during her 4 years at Vanderbilt, she developed a semester-long course to teach providers the principles of medical photography and led several local Nashville community service initiatives as her class vice president. Becca is interested in pediatric neurosurgery and global health, serving as an NIH Fogarty Global Health Fellow for the 2019 to 2020 in Lusaka, Zambia. There, she studied pediatric hydrocephalus and spina bifida and continues her research from Nashville. So Dr. Reynolds, we're really excited to have you, and if you don't mind saying a few minutes about your work.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sarah. And so thanks y'all for having me here today. Excited to be here, excited to talk about this topic. It's something that's near and dear to my heart. And my story is not so different from Adam's in that global surgery is relatively new to me. It's something that I've always had an interest in. I was not on the path to neurosurgery or surgery for that matter early on in medical school, and kind of found my way through it all. And so I really had my first global surgery experience last year. It's something that's always I've been interested in and tried to think about, but the opportunity never was quite right timing wise until last year. I'm at Vanderbilt, as Sarah mentioned, right now for my residency. I'm a 6th-year resident there. And so I just finished my 2 research years during my 4th and 5th years. In my 5th year, I just finished a NIH Fogarty Global Health Fellowship, as she mentioned, which is a fully funded year plus $50,000 of research funding to study a topic of your choice in the location of your choice in the world. And so I really kind of through friends of friends, and over the course of, it took me the better part of a year to figure out how to what this fellowship was and the opportunities that were available and whether this could work or not, and logistics and things like that. And I think we'll kind of go into that later throughout this panel, because that's a lot of the grunt work behind it. But it turned out to be an extraordinary experience, and one that I would highly encourage for anyone who's thinking about neurosurgery in the future. It's something that's also available to medical students. And so it's for physicians, surgeons, optometrists, pharmacists, nurses, PhD, researchers, you name it. And so it's really a broad cohort of people who are eligible to apply for this fellowship. And as such, competition is stiff, but it's something that they're really eager and interested to have surgeons and future surgeons be a part of it, because traditionally surgeon scientists are much more rare entity than other specialties out there. And so this is something that I had the opportunity to work on peds, hydro, and spina bifida management there, and really develop relationships over the course of the year that I've been able to continue since coming back to the States and to finish my residency. And I think the nice thing about the NIH Fogarty Global Health Fellowship is it's tied to the NIH. And so it really sets you up nicely for future NIH awards, specifically the K Award, if that's something that you're interested in a career as a surgeon scientist in the future. And so I'll kind of leave it there, and can open the floor to questions more about the specifics later on. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reynolds. So next we have Dr. Megan Still. Megan is a 2nd-year neurosurgery resident at the University of Florida. She earned her MD with distinction in global health from the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center, where she took a year away to study neurosurgery and anesthesia rotations in France, Cambodia, and Morocco, with a research focus on global neurosurgical education and neurotrauma interventions in low-resource settings. So Megan is on the GSSA board, and her interest in GSSA stemmed from her participation in the First Incision Global Surgery Student Symposium, where she met students from around the world who are making changes in their local communities and enthusiastic to work in expanding the reach and impact of global surgery movement. She returned home to help start the UT Southwestern chapter of GSSA and co-direct the first Texas Global Surgery Hackathon. After graduation from medical school, she transitioned to participate as one of the VPs of residents and trainees, with a goal to work on projects that bridge the gap between interested students and practicing global surgeons, and improving the experiences of residents participating in global surgery throughout their training. So Dr. Still, it's exciting to have you here, and so if you don't mind saying a few minutes about your work.
Yeah, thanks for that introduction. I'm Megan. Like she said, I'm a PGY2 in Florida. I was lucky enough to get interested in global health pretty early on. Actually, it's one of the reasons I went to medical school. But very early on, I was concerned that neurosurgery wasn't a possibility to do global work. I was kind of torn between my 2 loves, was neurosurgery and global health. And I figured I would eventually, in the end of medical school, have to choose either being like a primary physician or an ED doc to do the global aspect of it, or neurosurgery and kind of stay at home. And luckily enough, in 2015, with the Lancet Commission and kind of everything that came out of that, I was able to get in kind of early on in my career in the global neurosurgery aspect of things, and realize that it actually is a feasible career path. So as you mentioned, I've been just kind of working towards that early on, and am in the process actually of applying for the Fogarty Fellowship for my research year coming up in 2 years from now.
Thank you very much for being here, Dr. Still. So last but not least, we have Dr. Weiss, who just joined us and will be in and out. And so Hannah Weiss went to medical school at Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine and is now starting her first year of neurosurgery residency at NYU. She has a strong interest in global surgery and expanding access to neurosurgical care in low and middle income countries, and has performed research and served on the international board within the research sub-team for incision, as well as the VP of Advocacy for GSSA. So Dr. Weiss, if you are able, we'd love to hear a few minutes about your work.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Hi. Yeah, so I'm Hannah Weiss. I am very new to the field, both of global surgery and even any, neurosurgery. I just started residency here, as she said, a couple months ago, July. And I too, kind of echoing what Megan was just saying, really, was torn initially with an early interest in public health and specifically global health, but then also during medical school realizing that I was really, really drawn to the surgical subspecialties and didn't really recognize that there was this need and you can really do both. That being said, I'm so early in my career. I've done a couple, really fun research projects and been inspired by some wonderful mentors. Early on, I did a research year when I kind of switched last minute into neurosurgery and got involved with a few projects, as well as with incision and with GSSA, which has been incredible. And also made a couple simple changes to pursue this better, even things like making a Twitter and following some leaders in global neurosurgery has been huge. But I'm very much new to exploring the field. I kind of just navigated the match with trying to decide, how to look at programs with this interest in eventually doing global neurosurgery work. How do you value that when you're ranking programs and all of that? So if anyone has any questions about kind of the very early stages of applying and starting out residency and incorporating global neurosurgery into that decision making, I'm more than happy to help answer those questions. But I, like many of you watching this, are just in the beginning stages of exploring the field as well, and excited to get more into it. And I will, unfortunately, I'm on call by surprise, so I'm going to leave my email in the chat, and feel free to reach out with any questions that someone new to the field and new to neurosurgery and all that can answer. I'm sure my colleagues on the call will be able to far better answer any specifics and research and work in global neurosurgery. I'm learning from them every day too. So I'll leave my email. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Weiss. We really appreciate it. So now that we've done introductions, we're going to move into just talk a little bit about of what it's like, what residency programs are like, and what it's like applying a residency. So the first question we have is, can you all give an overview of how research time looks like in neurosurgery and the most common ways people use them? And so some of the questions we have are, how have you seen residents incorporate global surgery work into the residency schedule, either short-term, long-term, or through various programs like masters or fellowships? So if anyone wants to start first, for whoever is able.
I can, sure. So I think the big thing about this is Hannah touched on, is that every program is different. And so I think Adam was talking a little bit about how he's on his research time now as a PGY6 at Montefiore, so I'll let him talk more about that. But from my side of things, Vanderbilt, we have two research years, one of which is fully protected. And so I think that's really important for global health work when you're looking at programs overall, is if it's a fully protected research year, you'll hear that term a lot as you start to look into neurosurgery residencies. And that's something that means that you're out of the call pool. And so that's incredibly important if you want to do global health away from your program. So for me, I had to have a fully protected research year in order to leave Vanderbilt, and definitely to leave the country, right? Because there's no flying back and forth to take call here and there. And so that's something that I think is really important when you're trying to consider programs overall. And then it's also important, as Hannah touched on too, that the programs that you pick, every program has a little bit different interest and aspect and approach to global neurosurgery. And so I kind of divide global neurosurgery into three main topics overall. And one is clinical, and the second is research, and the third is advocacy. And so you have to kind of think about which pieces of those three you want to have as part of your global experience, or which combination of those. And so that's going to help guide what opportunities are appropriate for you, which ones you want to pursue. and which programs are right for you. There are a number of different programs with different clinical mission trips, so to speak, for like a week or two. There are different programs that sponsor a month away, and there are some that are more interested in low and middle income settings compared to high income settings. And then there's ones where it's like what I am doing, which is a year, or what I did, which was a year away, completely focused on research, but I integrated clinical into mine as well. And so that's something that you just have to start thinking about in your mind, what you're most interested in. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Dr. Reynolds.
Yeah, I think Rebecca hit the nail on the head there. It's really about what you want out of it. Every program is going to be different. The research years are going to vary. I only have one research year in my program. A lot of other programs will have two, whether it's protected or not, if one of the years is protected, and what they allow you to do. Some programs, they encourage you to do basic science research or stay at the institution to work on projects that attendings there have, and they have a lot of support for that. And so if that's something that you want to do, then you can do it. And as she talked about, there are different pillars of global neurosurgery. It's not just, I'm a global neurosurgeon, it's what you're interested in doing. And so if you're interested in policy advocacy, it's something where you might not necessarily be traveling abroad for an entire year. You might be going for short trips. If you're interested in research, you might not even necessarily have to go at all. There's some things that you can do remotely and get it working on the ground. And then once again, you're working with partners there in the local countries. And then if you want to do clinical work, then that's something that, of course, you need to be there for a longer term. And so it's really about what you're looking to do, what they're offering. But the biggest thing is, do they support it? And so, as I said, some programs encourage you to do certain things. People can do everything. In my program, I was able to do whatever I wanted. If I wanted to go get an MBA or an MPH, they'd support me. But you have to be in charge of that. Not every place is going to have it set up for you. And so you have to have it planned out. You have to figure out your funding. You have to really be on top of the ball there. And so I think the first question is to ask, what do you want? Because when you're applying for a residency, this goes beyond just the research year in global neurosurgery, but it isn't just about what's the top programs. When I was applying, everybody wanted MGH, Mayo, Miami, and halfway through the interview processes, I realized that it's not just about the name. And I think that's very important, is that you have to see what's the place that connects with you, what's the best place for you. And so understanding these questions to ask is very important.
Hi, yeah, I would echo that as well. I think there's one really great way to do it is look at what other residents that have recently come before you are doing at those programs. Are they happy is critical, but also look at what type of research they're doing. There are certain wonderful programs, but every single person comes out of there doing basic science, and that's not a coincidence. So for me, it was really important to see that the programs were encouraging all different types of research, not just a certain kind or a certain lab. And that kind of helped give me a little bit of an idea where they might support something like global surgery research compared to some others.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Dr. Still, is there anything you would like to add, or we can also move on?
Yeah, I think everyone pretty much covered it. But yeah, my program, there is not really a lot of interest in global health, and there's no one who's done like PGSSC or anything, or Fogarty or anything like that. But one of the reasons why it was highly ranked for me was because there were multiple people who had taken years away. Our research year isn't technically protected, but there were certain people who had gone away for months and or a year at a time. And essentially our department supports you if you have a valid reason to be gone, and frequently funding as well is important, of course. But essentially it's important to find a place that you think will support whatever your goals may be. So if that's basic research, or if that's doing global research but from your home institution, that's great. But if it's also finding a place that will give you the flexibility to do whatever it is you can and want to do within reason, I think is what is most important to look out for.
Thank you all very much. So moving on to our next question, is we touched on it a little bit, but what did you find most important when looking at residencies? And with this, how strongly did you consider support for global surgery when choosing a program? And it might be also helpful to talk a little bit about funding, if you looked at funding and how you weighed that when looking at residencies and funding for global health opportunities.
I mean, I think, I guess aside from Hannah, I probably went through the match most recently, I guess, between all of us. But mostly what I was looking at is, like I said, the flexibility and support from the PD and the chair. So not necessarily had someone before me done global surgery or do they have a global surgery program, although that's great. It can definitely make your life easier if you already have an attending or previous seniors involved in global neurosurgery and who had set the precedent for going away and presenting it as like a value add to the department, even though it was technically off campus. And those can certainly rank higher just from an ease of getting things set up. But sometimes it's nice to be a trailblazer, and as long as you find that in your interviews that you think you'll have support for your ideas of this research or global surgery work, then that frequently would be what would tip me over the edge from a ranking standpoint. So I rank those very highly because I think ultimately, like Adam was saying, you can get great training anywhere. And a lot of what your residency is going to be is, are people happy and do you get along and can you get good training, which is essentially anywhere. And so for me, the flexibility of the research year and the support, or at least the apparent support of the department for just supporting the residents' research interests, regardless of what those interests were, is what really influenced my rank list.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when I was applying, I didn't look at it all because I wasn't focused on global surgery at the time. And that was before the Lancet Commission and everything. And so I was kind of in that same boat where I had done some work with underserved populations in med school, but then ultimately in deciding on neurosurgery, I was like, I'll have to do like MSF or something after I graduate because there's nothing available for non-primary care people. But looking back at it and how I went through it, nobody did global surgery before me. But my program director, the way I got connected with the Virtue Foundation is that he works with the Virtue Foundation as well. And so that's my connection to the work on Mongolia. And so even though we don't have a global surgery program, the fact that he did that, he was supportive of it. And so when I came around and said, I want to do this, he worked with me to figure out what would be the funding, to talk to the people at the institution to make sure that they supported me in what I did. And I think that's the most important thing, is having the support. Then you can figure out all the rest of those are just details. As long as they support you, you'll be able to get it done, even if nobody else has done it before you.
Yeah, I think
key,
oh no, go ahead, sorry.
I think a key point here is you're way ahead of the ball if you're already thinking about funding and stuff like that at y'all's levels. So I think the big thing here when you're looking at programs is less about the specifics as a student and more really about the general theme of support. So you need support from the department in the sense that you need some time to be able to go away and do that. And you need someone within the department who's going to be your champion. And so you don't have to have that one person figured out, but in the questions, there's always an opportunity to ask questions when you're a student interviewing during the interview process, and just pitch the question to anybody about the idea of global neurosurgery and time and investment of whatever you think that may take for you, and see what their reaction is. Because I think if you have somebody who maybe hasn't done global neurosurgery before but is interested in supporting that, I think that's huge. Then the other piece of it too, though, is the institution. Each of these medical centers are usually part of greater medical schools. Most programs in the country are. And academic universities and undergrad as well. And each of these places, or many of these places, have institutes of global health or something similar to that, a global health program at the undergrad and medical student level. And so if those are resources as well, because they're all one cohesive picture together. So at Vanderbilt, we have a huge Institute of Global Health, and we're one of the host sites for global neurosurgery, for global health in general. We have a master's in global health and everything like that. And so that is available to you when you are an employee or a resident or however you want to phrase it at that institution. And so looking at the institution as a whole of what you're looking at when you're trying to pick a program, I think is really important too, because those resources when they're at your home institution are much easier to achieve than ones having to go, like me having to go to Harvard would be a lot harder than me just having to stay at Vanderbilt and work through that system that I know very well. So.
Thank you, everyone. So this segues well into our next question, which is, if you could go back again, what other information would you have ascertained from programs when applying? So what kind of support do you find important for residents pursuing global surgery that you might not have had considered before or during the application process? So for an example, we said applying to medical school, that a number of us didn't think about what level trauma surgery or trauma center a medical center would be. And so if you're interested in trauma, how that would work, or being a transplant center with an associated hospital.
I think it kind of goes back, just echoing what I just said, is looking at the institution as a whole. So you get really focused on the neurosurgery department itself, but the neurosurgery department is frequently a division in places, and it's part of the general surgery department or surgical sciences or whatever. So every institution is a little bit different. And so even if neurosurgery doesn't have global health ties, then maybe the general surgery department does, and that person would be a mentor for you. Or they know somebody who will be connected to the Institute of Global Health at that institution. And so I think try to keep your scope broad when you're considering an institution. If global surgery is you feel is going to be a major part of your career. And I think that is probably the biggest thing, is not to narrow your focus too much on this.
Yeah, that's the beauty of global neurosurgery. That's just the beauty of global neurosurgery. It's not like a program where if they're not a level 1 trauma center, you're not going to be getting the same trauma education as someplace that does. You know, you can always work with other institutions. And so you don't necessarily need to have a program in global neurosurgery at that place in order to reap the same benefits. There's a lot of collaboration that goes on.
Exactly. There's a lot of collaboration, and a lot of times your mentors will be at places that you're not necessarily at. And I think that there's huge value in that as well. It keeps your eyes open and your mind open to different ways of doing things and different ways of approaching different questions and problems. And one thing that one of my mentors said, who's not here at NYU, but at another program, she said that first and foremost, you have to become a good neurosurgeon and really be happy where you are, therefore, and excited to go to work and motivated to learn everything you possibly can about neurosurgery. And that's like the first step to becoming, you know, someone really involved in global neurosurgery. And instead of approaching it, you know, first thing July 1st of intern year straight into like global focus work, really like my job right now, and many of you, once you start residency, is to just learn the basics and to really get good at that. And so picking a place that you'd be excited about and think you'd get a great training at, and maintaining great relationships with mentors that might be near or far, I think is a good way. I really like that piece of advice. It stuck with me, and I hope it resonates with some of you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You're there for 7 years as a neurosurgeon. If you're going in to train as a global neurosurgeon, then you're gonna hate it, because most of your training is just gonna be a neurosurgeon at that institution. So you have to love working with the people that are there and doing the work that they're doing, not necessarily just focus on global neurosurgery.
Thank you, everyone. So the next question is, many teaching hospitals have global surgery centers or initiatives that span across all surgical or surgical affiliated specialties. Would you recommend students connect with these centers during their virtual interviews with neurosurgery programs? And then maybe as a follow-up, did you connect, or how did you connect with these centers once in residency?
I can answer this one. I did not necessarily do this. And I don't think it's absolutely necessary. I think if there's someone you're really interested in though, and you bring it up on your interview and you say, the reason why I'm interested in this program is because so-and-so is here doing awesome global neurosurgery work, and I'm interested in global neurosurgery, and you can see that I am because I've worked on this research paper or whatever it is. They will ask you, or sometimes they will question whether or not you've reached out. And I, in particular, remember an interview where they said, well, have you talked to him? And I was like, well, not yet. And it was just kind of like a silly, awkward moment. So I definitely didn't reach out to every program global neurosurgery person. I'm curious what the other panelists have to say about that. But I guess if you bring it up, just be ready on your interviews to comment on, on that as well. It's something that kind of stuck with me.
I wasn't interested in, or I was interested, but I didn't consider that a major part of my criteria pursuing a neurosurgical program. And so I can't say that I've reached out, but having interviewed applicants now for a couple of years on the other side of the spectrum, I would definitely say that if it's something you're interested in, I want to hear about it, and your interviewer wants to hear about it. And we are interested to hear about what you have done so far to show that you're interested. And if that's not, and you're just saying that, hey, I'm interested in this and I'm thinking about this as part of when I'm considering my neurosurgical career, that's great. You don't have to have a global health experience to be interested in this. I didn't until last year. So it's no pressure if it's not something that it's just like a floating thought for you right now. It's something that you're considering. If it's something that you are hardcore about, you're absolutely 100% sure, then what Hannah said, yes, you definitely should be reaching out to people. And if that's critical to your happiness at a neurosurgical program, then yes, you need to be looking into that and thinking about well in advance. If it's something that's more of a thought for you that you're considering in the future and you're starting to build your network and make your contacts, then just bringing it up during your interviews is perfectly appropriate and well received.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the institution, the situation too, because as everyone knows in neurosurgery, you're applying to 60, 70, 80 programs or something. You can't possibly reach out to every single global health advocate or worker at every single institution. And sometimes you don't necessarily find out that you got an interview until, a week or a month before that interview. And it could potentially seem a little disingenuous if you just reach out at that point to that one person just to say like, hey, I'm interested, just to have something to talk about during interviews. So I made some connections with some people who were in global surgery at institutions in particular that I really wanted to end up at, or that I was involved with research or through connections or whatever prior to that. But I don't think it's necessarily imperative that you reach out to every single global neurosurgery person who's involved just because you're interviewing at that institution. It might give you something to connect with them with. It might give you something to talk about people in common while you're interviewing with them, but I don't think it's necessarily a problem if you say you're interested in global neurosurgery, but you haven't yet reached out to that one individual at that institution you're at.
Great, thank you. So then moving on to another question is, we'd love to hear some input and have you name some residency programs that have faculty dedicated to global surgery and that you know of are supportive of residents being involved in global surgery work or taking time off for global surgery work.
So, I mean, Vanderbilt, Michael Dewan just came back there. He's a big name in a lot of the research. He went through the program in global surgery and social change. He's building a program for them. They're dedicated to that. Henry Ford has people there, Duke in particular. Haglund has been doing it for a very long time. Cornell Hartle has a twinning program in Tanzania. That's up at Harvard, specifically in Boston Children's. Ben Wharf is very heavily involved. However, it's the Children's Hospital. You're not always going to be connected with them, and Ben Wharf is very difficult to get in touch with. he gets pulled in multiple different directions. So I wouldn't depend on him being necessarily a mentor, but he is a great guy to work with. I don't know if there's any other programs. The West Coast in general tends to be a little more lacking, but it doesn't mean that there aren't people there who are interested in it.
That's a great list that Adam put together. I think the only other couple that I would add would be Northwestern, is where the GSSA, the Global Surgery or Alliance, whatever GSSA stands for, Global Surgery Alliance of some kind, that is based out of, and that's where the G4 Alliance is based out of, and that's a huge global surgery, anesthesia, OB, like neurosurgery mecca. And so they're the big program in Chicago that focuses on global health. And then the other one is George Washington and Gail Rousseau. She is a major player, a huge advocate, heavily involved with the WHO. And I know Sarah knows her well too. And so that's probably the big people that I can think of across the country that are major players and mentors and advocates.
Yeah, I know there's Madison and Miami both have attendings who have been big players in the global field for a long time. I think they will incorporate residents as a like month-long or more mission trip, more like work as a rotation. But I know they have longitudinal like studies and education things at both of those institutions. And then UAB works in Vietnam. I think that's their children's hospital as well.
Yeah, Dempsey, Sandy Lam, and then Miami, Bart Green pretty much built up the hospital in Haiti after the quakes there. So,
Thank you all very much. And so our last question before we'll then move on to the pre-submitted questions, and then we'll also ask the audience is welcome to send questions in the Q&A, is what are some challenges specific to the field of neurosurgery within the larger field of global surgery that you see or that you faced?
Certainly early on in our careers as trainees and even early career surgeons is going to be the time. Of course, like we've all been talking about, whether you have dedicated protected time for research, and that applies when you're an attending too. The way you set up your salary and your RVUs and your compensation, all that is going to depend a lot, or is going to influence a lot how much involvement you can have in global surgery, global research, and traveling and all that kind of stuff. Whether it's going to be all on your own time and all self-funded, or you're going to somehow magically get your institution to count it as actual protected research time, or there's a lot of different, I think, time involvement difficulties that we're all still trying to work through. And having more people involved in this field and contributing to the literature and demonstrating the value add to the community and the world will really influence this going forward as a valid research and career track, rather than something that a lot of our predecessors have had to kind of do on their own time and due to their own passions.
yeah, I think that's an important point. So my wife has been heavily involved in global health for the past decade. She did an MPH. She's worked with the UNHCR, WHO. And when she was deciding on residency, she was looking at neurosurgery, OB, and peds, and she ultimately went with peds because every residency program, you're going to be tied up with time, but neurosurgery is 7 years. You'll have 1 or 2 research years to focus on it, but you still have the rest of that time where you really can't focus on anything else that you want to do because of how involved you are clinically. And so in primary care, where it's only a 3-year residency, you're out of the game for 3 years, gaining the clinical skills, but you can get right back into it. And so that's a big factor that comes in because you're so focused the rest of the time, it becomes very difficult to be involved. The other thing is just overall surgery only started being a big player in global health recently because of the Lancet Commission. And before that, everybody thought it was a luxury, that it's too expensive to have in LMICs. And neurosurgery, even after surgery was deemed that way, is still seen as too expensive. And we do have a lot of technology that's used in neurosurgery more so than any other surgical specialty. And it becomes difficult, but it's not impossible. There's a lot of research out there. Some neurosurgical cases cost as much as doing an appendectomy. And so there is data to support that you can do it, but there's still this notion that it's hard to do it. And even MSF doesn't really hire neurosurgeons because they don't see it as necessarily in disaster and too expensive.
Great. So now we'll move on to some pre-submitted questions from attendees. And we also open up the chat function. So if anyone wants to post a question either in the chat or on the Q&A board, we can ask those live as well. But the first pre-submitted question we have is, did any residency programs feel your interest in global neurosurgery detracted from classical neurosurgery efforts? So I know Dr. Ammar mentioned earlier about focused on more, some programs are focused more on basic science, and people who come before you have done more basic science. And so did you face any challenges with programs like that?
I would definitely say that, again, as someone who was interested later on in residency, I can't speak specifically to the current climate, but I will say that it is not a topic that is well received by every institution and every person within neurosurgery. So I think it's important that you take each institution case by case, do your research before you interview at a particular institution, try to identify those who seem to be supportive of it, and structure your questions and what you're trying to find out when you go to that program accordingly. Because while it is a hot buzzword and a hot topic within neurosurgery right now in many circles, there are many others who feel that we are trying so hard to work on low-income patients and poverty here in America that what are we doing going abroad? So I think that's important to consider as you start to find your way within this field.
Yeah, I definitely had multiple interviews where at least one, if not multiple people felt that and told me that global health and global neurosurgery specifically was pointless and a waste of money. I had one chair or PD or somebody, one of the professors I interviewed with, tell me that, why are you saving lives for people to go back to crappy, low quality lifestyle when your money would be better spent studying GBMs and try to curing people with cancer. And sometimes that'll surprise you, and sometimes you can just kind of tell globally from that institution, as Rebecca was saying, about just kind of what they're interested in and what everyone previously had been doing. And so you just got to be prepared for those. You got to be prepared to defend your position and your reasoning for why you're interested and why you think it actually is valuable, both to the community you're working in, but also to the medical community at large. I had some professors ask me that, and I gave them, my list of data and my reasons why I thought it was useful and my reasons why I thought it would help the overall community of medicine, because we are so interconnected in just like the world of medicine at large. And they actually said, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. These are well thought out. You actually have data points. We just wanted to make sure this wasn't just like you pursuing this trend, And so as long as you come in with thoughtful responses and answers to the questions, then some people you'll turn. Some people are just trying to get your response and your feedback, and some people you won't turn, and that's fine, but you need to know that, and that'll happen.
The only thing I would add to that is you have to be careful about what exactly you think global neurosurgery is, because the point that it is a waste of money is actually founded in some good reasons. And that the history of global health in general is this savior complex of people from high-income countries going to low-middle-income countries and just treating people, saying that they saved lives, but they did nothing to change the social situations that they're in and the factors that lead to them having poor health in the first place. And so there's become this trend of surgical missions where people will travel, say if they did good because they went there for 2 weeks and did some surgeries and then left. And the impact it really isn't anything. And so the question is, are you actually having an impact? Are you doing something? Or are you just doing this volunteerism that's become a big trend throughout global health in general? And so when you're looking at these programs and you're talking to people, like Megan said, you have to have a good reason for why you want to do this. It has to be grounded. And then you also have to be looking at the programs too and what they're doing. Because you can find a place that they're doing medical mission trips, and it's becoming this increasing trend where programs send residents overseas to LMICs in order to get clinical training experience. They're sending them there because there's no legal ramifications to them practicing on underserved patients. And so you have to be careful of places that provide that without thinking it through. So you also want some place that's going to be training you properly in the care of these patients.
It's a great point. Thank you. And so the next question we have is, if you're interested in global surgery, but matched in a program that hasn't had any residents participate in global surgery, how do you recommend bringing this up with your program director and going about really paving a way for global surgery in your program?
You have to make your case. So every time you go away from residency, it's not necessarily a funded thing. Your program and your institution, everyone is different. But like at Vanderbilt, they won't, like the GME, it won't pay for more than, I think, a month or two away from Vanderbilt, except for select situations. And departments, some can fund a couple of months. Very rarely will you have a department that can fund an entire year of your salary out of its pocket, because you are paid by the graduate medical education, the ACGME, which is through Medicare and Medicaid funding. That's where your resident salary comes from. So our department in Vanderbilt is in the firm belief that they will support you with whatever you want to pursue, as long as you are clearly demonstrating what you're interested in, your dedication, and how you're trying to help yourself succeed. So maybe by saying like, hey, I want to go spend a year in Africa. Can I go do that? Okay, thanks, bye. It's not going to go well, right? So I had to work on this for an extended period of time, finding funding opportunities, working with the GME in advance, showing my research, getting things started in advance, making contacts and things like that. So it's a lot of grunt work. But I think that's the biggest thing of how you sway a department for what you're interested in. I had to make my case to be able to go for a year. I was the first person to leave for an entire year for global health reasons in my program. And so that's something that as long as the program is receptive to the idea, I think that as long as you make your case, it's usually something that you can argue whatever you want to do, you can make it happen.
Yeah, if you come to them with a plan, most of the time they will support you unless they're a place that just doesn't support that kind of work. And so when I did it, I got involved because my mentor in pediatrics connected me to Rick Boop, who connected me to Walt Johnson, who used to be the head of surgery at the WHO, and he connected me to Key Park at PGSSC. And so I built up this multiple options where I was offered an unpaid internship at the WHO. I had the PGSSC, and I applied for a Fulbright. And my program doesn't just pay for me to do whatever I wanted to do. And so when going through it, because of COVID, the Fulbright became only half a year. They wouldn't let you travel until January. Walt Johnson left the WHO, and so I was left the PGSSC. And I needed to find funding because that's not funded. And I then ended up working with my department to figure out how I would get funding through them or other grants. Luckily working with them, but I had to make compromises. So now I'm working as a fellow with them and at the PGSSC. And so I'm doing research in both places in order to fund it. And so some people, they work out a thing where they're no longer protected. They might have to come in for maybe a month in the year or once a week to do clinical call in order to make sure that the hospital pays you. As long as you're willing to compromise, work with them, a lot of times they'll be willing to work with you to figure it out.
Yeah, I'm gonna sound like a brokered record here, but I'm pretty much in the same boat. Just having gone through 1 year of residency, I haven't applied formally for any of these programs yet, but every year we do like check-ins with our PD, and he is just like, he checks in with us and says, hey, what are you thinking of for your research year? I need you to think ahead, because a lot of these things either require funding or planning out your research. And these kinds of things. And he essentially told me, if you're going to leave our institution, you need to get funding, basically. And so, of course, I'm working on the Fogarty or the Fulbright, whatever options there are for fully funded global health research. I think at this point in my mind, my fallback, not real fallback, but I would attempt to do the PGSSE if I didn't get either of those funded options. As I know, there's been multiple residents who have gone and done that program unfunded, and they work at a schedule there where they fly back to their institution X number of weeks to take call to essentially like earn their salary with the institution. I know there's been multiple prior fellows who have had to work that out with the PGSSE and with their program to make it kind of work. It's less ideal, but it is an option that I know a lot of people in global neurosurgery are pretty flexible to the best of their ability, because they know we're all trainees that are constrained by these time and monetary limits. And so I think there's a lot of flexibility and understanding in the community. But you do have to definitely put in the grunt work and the legwork, and as early as you possibly can, to demonstrate to your program that you've done to the best of your abilities to get funding and make this a formal thing that adds value to the department.
Thank you. That's all really helpful. And then our next question is, have you dedicated any of your research years to the pursuit of an MPH or research within global neurosurgery or other associated degrees? And what are your thoughts on that? That's the helpfulness of that within the field.
No, is a short word. I haven't pursued any of those. I have co-residents that have pursued various extended degrees in biostats and education and public health and things like that. And I think it's ultimately up to you of what you want your career trajectory to be. So if you're someone who wants to run a public health lab and a global health lab and have that be a core part of your academic career, then I think an MPH could be helpful to you if you feel like you don't already have those skills from what you've gained in undergrad and medical school and residency up to this point. For me, I didn't feel like that was something that was going to add a lot of value to what I want my career to look like at this stage. But I think that that's dependent on a case-by-case basis. And so if you feel like that's something that you would learn during those years is integral to what your career is going to look like, then I think it's important to do that. But I think it's also, think about, we have residents that pursue degrees, and degrees are expensive. And so again, the common theme here is you have to find funding. And so usually departments our department will help support the degree in part, but you have to meet them part way, and it depends where the degree is being done and things like that. So again, that's another department by department things. And you really shouldn't be pursuing a degree just to have more letters after your name. That's not something that really gains a lot of traction. Once you graduate medical school, it's kind of like, okay, you have an MD, everything else is more for your own personal benefit and what you want to achieve. It's less about that's going to make you sound smarter or more important or get you more grant funding or thing like that. I kind of feel, that's my personal belief, that kind of starts to taper off and about the articles you've published and the work you've done and what you can talk about your work.
Yeah, I mean, it's the big thing is the funding and the time. So MPHs will usually take about 2 years. If you do the PGSSC, you can apply for the Harvard MPH, and they work with the program to make sure that you can get it done in that time. But the funding does come in, and because it's education, you can take out more loans, but we're already swamped in loans. You have to really make sure that that's something that you want, that's going to be beneficial more so than like what Rebecca said, just having more letters after your name. And it doesn't have to be an MPH. You know, I was looking at doing a social entrepreneurship MBA because that's more in line with what I want to do. The time frame doesn't fit up because they go September to September. And so since our years are July to July, that doesn't work out. But you can look at plenty of other things. You can do a master's in medical anthropology. There's all kinds of other different things that you can do. It doesn't have to just be an MPH.
Yeah, I would definitely encourage everyone to look into the options at their institution. I don't think this should necessarily be a primary consideration when applying as a medical student or regarding your rank list, but UF and UAB, I know as well as I'm sure a number of others actually fund residents to do higher education at their institution. So for example, if I got accepted into the MBA or the MPH program at UF, it would be free for me to do that program. And I definitely agree. It has to be something that would truly be a value add to your career path, and something that is more than just getting an extra degree for the sake of getting an extra degree. So I myself am looking into the MPH, but less for the global health aspect and more for the biostats. There's an online MPH specific to looking at population level biostats that I think could potentially be helpful for bringing my global surgery work forward and in my future career and path. Otherwise, I also am potentially considering an MBA with the thought that if my passion is in education and increasing access to residencies and wanting to establish more residency programs in countries that don't necessarily have that, then perhaps a more business background would be beneficial there, because of course residency programs are more than just training people, but it's where's that funding going to come from? How is that going to integrate into the medical school and the health ministry and the whole of the country, and all those kinds of things that I just myself don't have experience in. And so if you can find a program that fits with your research interests, that's great, and it should be encouraged. But I also would encourage you to look at the funding opportunities, because I know definitely there's multiple institutions that will actually fund residents to get those, as long as you stay at your own institution.
Thank you all very much. So I think we have time for one last question. And so we'll ask the last pre-submitted question was, what are some ways to find mentors in neurosurgery, and how do you know if they are good for you and whether you should stick with them while pursuing your journey?
Find a resident. Don't go straight for the faculty. So we as residents are usually a lot more you're able to get a hold of us. There's just less inundation from an administrative standpoint for us, depending on different days of the week and stages of our residency. It depends on that. But find a resident who is open to mentoring students or has a contact somewhere at that institution. Or if you have a resident at your home institution who knows somebody, a lot of us know each other in the same year. So neurosurgery is a small field. And so reach out to a resident, and they'll be able to connect you with faculty if that's something. And then usually we as residents, especially in later stages, like Adam and I we have our own research projects now that we are happy to have students involved with, and just kind of depends on where we're at and different given projects if there's time availability. I know Sarah did that with me, and now we have a project going in ETV stuff. So it's just reach out. Don't be afraid to be told no. If we don't have an opportunity right now, there'll be another one here within a couple of months. And so that would be what I would think.
Yeah, I mean, so it's the same as any other mentor, you know. It doesn't have to be, they don't have to be in global neurosurgery or global surgery. It's really somebody who's going to listen to you and see what you want and support you in that. It's not somebody who they do a lot of global neurosurgery work and they're going to help you get you onto their research projects and get you published. Somebody that just utilizes you for your work is not a mentor. And so, like Rebecca said, you know, residents are much more available, really supportive. Jacob Lepard at UAB and Jackie Corley at Duke were extremely helpful in me getting involved in global neurosurgery in general. And there are people that I would highly recommend you guys to reach out to. Any of us, I'm sure, would be happy to work with you guys. But also, you know, anybody who's outside of global neurosurgery. So my mentor in pediatric neurosurgery at my program, Rick Abbott, is the one that got me connected into what I'm doing, because he connected me to Rick Boop, who connected me to Walt Johnson, who connected me to Key Park. And all of these people were very supportive of what I wanted to do, and they looked around to see how I could get involved and how they could help me. And so I am going to make one little plug. As part of my work in running the Global Neurosurgery Committee of the WFNS, part of that is we formed a junior committee of students and residents who are interested in this kind of work, who want to be involved in any research projects, get involved with any mentors or other projects that are going on. So I'll put my email in the chat. You guys can reach out to me if you want to get involved. There's no application process. we're just building a community of people who want to work together. And so what you will end up doing is you'll be able to get connected to people all around the world who are doing this kind of work, as well as get to know the neurosurgeons on the committee who are also working on this stuff, and you get to work with them and see if you can find a mentor in that group as well.
Yeah, I echo Adam there. One of my mentors at UF, we don't, like I said, we don't really have global neurosurgery people here. Just people who are willing to kind of support you if you demonstrate passion and work for a certain theme. But I also actually am interested in pediatric neurosurgery. I guess that makes the trifecta here. But my pediatric neurosurgeons both are extremely supportive of me training in the field in the future. But also, even though they don't do global surgery themselves, they have, both of them offer to connect me with people they know. If neurosurgery is a small field, pediatric neurosurgery is even smaller, and they all kind of know each other and know the projects that are going on and know who travels and does this and that. And so I think if you can just find someone who supports you and is a good mentor just kind of in life and your career, then you can find a way to pigeonhole that into global neurosurgery if that was not already a natural fit. I'll also take a second to make a pitch for the GSSA online what's it called, the database that also is filled with both students and residents, some young faculty as well who do global surgery work. So it's not, of course, all neurosurgery, it's all sorts of global surgery, anesthesia, OB-GYN, all the components of global surgery. But you can search by field, you can search by location, you can search by institution and find everybody's interests. And it's kind of like you can read their bios and also the projects they have ongoing and reach out to them to see if they have any projects ongoing, or we as people who are in the database can say, hey, I'm looking for a student to help me out with X kind of project. And so it's a good way to meet people and find mentors or groups that are working on projects you're interested in as well.
So it looks like it's a couple minutes after 6, and so we'll wrap things up. And so we just wanted to say a final thank you to all our fantastic panelists. This was incredibly informative, and we really appreciate your insights and wisdom from your experience in the field. And thank you everyone who came out this Sunday to join us. And this will be posted on YouTube as well later on the GSSA channel if anyone would like to go back and reference everything. So thank you all again. This was great. Hope you have a good rest of your night.
Great, thanks. Have a good one.
Thank you for having us.